GLP-1 medications do not cause muscle mass loss. Anytime you restrict your calories, especially to a great extent, which is happening on your GLP-1 medications, without a focus on muscle preservation, you will experience a great deal of muscle mass loss, and even worse, crash that metabolism. The reality is that proper protein intake, solid hypertrophy style weight training, and of course, not letting yourself get into starvation mode, and getting enough macro and micronutrients, meaning calories and nutrition, is absolutely vital for protecting your muscle mass. And it does not have anything to do with those GLP-1 medications, but rather not knowing how to utilize the medications correctly. And we're gonna get into that in this video. GLP-1 medications do not cause muscle mass loss. I answer this question a lot, and I decided to finally make this video, but specifically wanted to just address this topic and just nip this in the butt. I just wanted to end this discussion. I wanted to let you guys know, without a doubt, GLP-1 medications do not cause, GLP-1s like semaglutide or tirzepatide, do not cause muscle mass loss. You're wondering real quickly what GLP-1 medications are. Check out some videos on my other pages. This is all the craze right now in the weight loss and metabolic health space. You know, these GLP-1s are the best things we've ever had for metabolic health and, you know, weight loss and diabetes and a whole slew of other conditions. They're actually getting really popular, blowing up right now. And so there's concerns. You know, like anything, there's concerns over any new thing that's in the block. There's a lot of attention on these medications. A lot of people want to see them not do good. There's a lot of fear mongering and just crazy misinformation being spread rampant about these medications. I mean, I hear some pretty stupid things that people are saying. You know, it's unfortunate because we have such a powerful tool, yet the fear mongering and the scare tactics with ulterior motives in most of these cases are really deterring people like you guys watching this who could really benefit from this. You know, it's one of my current strong opinions that these medications are being used incorrectly. And I have plenty of videos where I get into why that is, and, you know, quickly stated people are just being put on way too high doses, way too quickly, and just unnecessarily so, because all you got to do is make some really reasonably, I would say, like not so insane changes. But of course, we want to go balls to the wall, get the best results. There's something to be said about really overhauling your lifestyle, but it doesn't even have to be that hardcore. Just some intermittent fasting, some weight training, lowering your carbohydrate intake, replacing it with healthy fats, eating less processed foods. Like, you get some of these basics in and wow, you're actually addressing the root cause of obesity. Holy crap, insulin resistance is getting better. I don't need to continue to ramp up my doses. And so we're seeing that kind of reaction take place. I coach people, in case you guys don't know this, my name is Dr. Jones. I have clinics that service across the nation, and I coach thousands of individuals. My medical practitioners prescribe and I do the coaching. So it's really cool in, you know, what it is I get to see. And this is one of the topics, muscle mass loss. And even Peter Attia came out not too long ago saying that he's seen great muscle mass loss in his patients. And I thought that was really interesting because I have a ton of respect for Peter Attia. And I think he's a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of accurate knowledge. And so, of course, with anything, when you watch a video, even when you read a medical journal, there's always nuance, and you're looking at one piece of information. I would be very confident that if you were to ask Peter Attia, does he think GLP-1 medications create muscle mass loss directly? No. Yet that statement that was clipped from God knows what, a ton of context was missing. When you look at the mechanisms of action with GLP-1 medications, they improve insulin resistance, they reduce inflammation. And so when you make these changes to the body, that you're actually putting the body into a better environment that would actually foster muscular growth. But there are other variables, of course, that are much more important and impact whether an individual grows muscle mass or loses muscle mass in this case. The two that I'm referencing would be caloric intake and adequate protein intake. This is well established. You hear about testosterone, you hear about growth hormone, for example, other powerful hormones. And you look at bodybuilders, for example, and you see how freaking insanely jacked they get, right? they're on testosterone, they're on growth hormone. These are very powerful signaling agents that produce a great deal of improvement in potential muscular growth. But no matter how powerful the agents are, and these individuals are on some pretty powerful cocktails. I mean, if you guys just check out the Trend Twins, oh God, I don't condone anything stupid like that. But, you know, these guys are getting famous. These young, I think they're in their early 20s, and they're just on Trenbolone, which is about the most powerful anabolic agent. Actually, Trenbolone isn't even a derivative of testosterone. I mean, this is a horse steroid, from what I understand, about 5 times more anabolic and androgenic, meaning strength producing and size producing compound compared to regular testosterone. And these 20-year-olds are just going balls to the walls with their trend. And anyways, I don't want to get too sidetracked with that. But despite the most powerful cocktail of agents to help support muscle mass, the very basics need to be in before any of these compounds can actually have an effect. The first one being calories. You have to have enough calories to grow muscle mass. You have to be in a caloric surplus. Now, there's some nuance to this, because technically speaking, you could be at a maintenance and grow a little bit of muscle mass. Hell, I'd even argue there are situations where you could be in a bit of a deficit and maybe put on a little bit of muscle mass, again, with a ton of agents supporting in the background. But so we'll eliminate that. I would say what's possible for you guys watching is, yeah, you could be at a caloric maintenance, so the scale doesn't change weight, yet you're measuring inches, which is why it's really important to not just look at weight on the scale, but also look at body fat percentage, circumference measurements, and loss of inches tells us that you're building muscle mass and losing fat mass. But even in that situation, which is awesome, again, without some agents helping, you're not going to really put on that much more muscle mass. If your goal is to make some substantial muscular gains, then you need to get into a little bit of a surplus to really accelerate. I mean, this is what bodybuilders do. They alternate between bulking periods and cutting periods, and bulking periods and cutting periods. And there's something to be said about that. You know, even for us in our program, we are obviously focused on a fat loss phase, a weight loss phase, a fat loss phase, and we get our individuals losing about 1% to 1.5% of weight per week in my groups. And we get them down, and then there's a point where we kind of get into this recomp. All right, let's increase your calories, let's keep the weight the same, but let's look for this recomposition effect. And then depending on how much muscle mass they lost, we might even put them on a little bit of a slow weight gain program. Just if we gain 2 to 3 pounds a month for the first couple months, I'd be really happy with that. Solid lean muscle tissue. To really explode in your gains, you have to have calories. With these crazy agents, and there's also this other kind of thing that's important to understand with weight training, guys. If you're just starting hypertrophy style training, which we're going to talk about what hypertrophy means in a bit, what that looks like, well, really any weight training program, especially hypertrophy, there's this crazy, cool newbie phase where you get amazing gains. Like, the gains are out of this world. And bodybuilders always joke, like, to be a newbie again and build muscle mass at that rate is just, it's awesome. And the more and more years of experience of lifting you get underneath your belt, with more and more gains, of course, during those years, the more challenging it becomes to continue to build more muscle mass, right? Your body adapts. It's kind of funny when you think about this, but your body adapts to the adaptation process, right? You're breaking down muscle mass. It's an adaptive response to the muscle fibers to repair and grow bigger. Over and over and over in time, your body this is how, one of the many reasons why the body is just so brilliant, is that it even adapts to the adaptive process and figures out ways to respond without having to grow bigger and stronger. And your body's always trying to do that. This is why you have to continue the threshold needs to be pushed more and more and more. Getting back to the calories though, it's fundamental. Calories need to be maintenance or above, and essentially above, for effective muscle growth to take place. Secondary to that, and also extremely important, is your protein intake. You could be in a surplus, but you're not getting enough protein. Kind of in a similar way of thinking of like calories, just to keep it simple, protein is this other thing that needs to be there. You gotta have enough protein. So even being in a surplus, not having enough protein is gonna be deleterious to your gains. And being in a deficit but having adequate protein, that gets really interesting. That's a situation that can be very effective for cutting and protecting against muscle loss, I should say, actually. Both of these variables, adequate protein and adequate calories, are very, very important for your gains. And a simple formula for protein requirements, just because there's this, the RDA recommendations are a freaking joke. You need at least a gram per pound of target body weight. Keep it simple. And if you're actually in that bulking phase and you're really trying to gain a couple pounds a month of lean muscle tissue, which, ladies, I need you to not be afraid of this. I know maybe the word bulk is probably not the word that you want to hear. No woman probably wants to hear bulk. And I shouldn't say woman or man nowadays. Some genders don't like to hear that. So my apologies. You get my point, hopefully. And there tends to be this observation that the feminine, there we go. Can I say that? Hopefully I can say that. Hopefully no one's gonna get mad. But the feminine approach is, I want to get lean and tone, but I'm more obsessed with the scale. And I've made several videos talking about that, to not be so worried about what the scale says. The protein requirements, so we have 1 gram per pound of target body weight, and then if you're bulking, 1 gram per pound of body weight. Simple enough. We don't need to make it any more convoluted than that. At the base of an effective muscle building program or muscle preserving program during a cut, those two variables are absolutely vital. Having enough calories, having enough protein, and then you can make arguments for a few more additional variables like inflammation, and stress has got to be controlled, and you need to be sleeping. And these are all true. These are all variables, but I'm just going to focus for the sake of this video on the two most important variables. Remember, we're talking about GLP-1 medications creating muscle mass loss, this fear-mongering idea that continues to creep its ways into my TikTok lives, into the minds of millions of people, and it just makes me laugh. Sometimes I'll say, look at me. Do I look like I'm losing muscle mass? Do I look like I'm at effect? And I'm currently on GLP-1 medications myself. Not that what works for me is going to work for you, but I am somebody who has struggled myself. I lost over 100 pounds about 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. And unfortunately, I struggled to keep it off for over a decade. And many of you know this that have been following me. It took me about 8 years to achieve stability in my weight. And that's why I'm so passionate. And over the last 10 years in a clinical setting, I've really, I believe, put it all together, created the FLOA protocol, which is FLOA, fasting like our ancestors. It's a structured approach towards prolonged fasting. But really what this evolution has been is, in my opinion, currently the most effective lasting weight loss strategy will include GLP-1 medications for most people, will include some powerful peptides like AOD 9604, or some of these growth hormone peptides like samorelin, tesamorelin. And then you have to pair it with aggressive lifestyle interventions like long fasting, like weight training, eating less processed foods, lowering our carbohydrate intake, working into a more keto, like a cyclic keto approach instead of staying keto, because that's just not sustainable. Because everything I try to do, since I have to live this myself, is I try to maintain sustainability. Sustainability to me is extremely important, because if I can't see myself doing it, it's hard for me to tell people, hey, that's all you got to do. That's why when you ask me about keto, when you ask me about carnivore, I'm not too confident that you're going to sit there and adhere to meat for the rest of your life. And, ketogenic diet's got way more options than keto, and even that's pretty challenging for most of you out there. So it's got to be sustainable. With the idea of GLP-1 medications, this incorrect observation is rightfully so confusing, because what are we seeing happening, right? We are seeing the masses lose muscle mass when they take GLP-1 medications. So GLP-1 medications create muscle mass loss, right? Well, now you kind of understand that there's a lot more to understand here, because GLP-1 medications are making certain things happen into your body. They are massively decreasing food chatter, and they are massively decreasing hunger. And so the problem right now, it's not the GLP-1 medications. It's the fact that the majority of you watching this can relate to this. Very few of you are actually working with a board-certified obesity specialist who's actually got the time to do a little bit of coaching with you. Most of you got this from a med spa or online clinic. If you had one conversation with a doctor, it was very minimal. and there's no coaching, there's no guidance, there's no structure, you have no idea what you're doing. Let me know in the comments if that sounds all too familiar. And you're literally starving. My gosh, every time I ask people when they join my program and they've been on GLP-1s, if I had to average the caloric intake for my ladies for 30 plus that have been on GLP-1s for over 3 months, 1,200 calories. This is what they're eating. Do you realize, because remember, I've been helping people before GLP-1s for a very long time, and the difficulty of which it would be to get into a intake of 1,200 calories for anybody, a 40-year-old lady, a 20-year-old, obviously a 20-year-old young male with a lot of muscle mass. That's an even insanely bigger caloric deficit because their total energy expenditure is so much higher. But even for my dormant middle-aged women, that's still a massive caloric restriction. That's still a very low intake of calories. This is a recipe for starvation mode, but when you're not on GLP-1 medications, getting into actual starvation mode, like your body is fighting tooth and nail. You're starving, you're hungry. You ever seen a bodybuilder, what it's like for them in their cutting phases? It's extremely challenging. These guys and gals are literally dreaming of food, salivating at the idea of food. After shows, sometimes there's some psychological duress there. It's kind of crazy. It's much more challenging and it just happens less often. Real starvation outside of the context of GLP-1 medications. But here we are, we're in a world now where these things exploded. And what's also exploded is uneducated and just lack of proper guidance, structure, and support. So people have no idea they're starving because they don't even feel it. And this is what I call ultimately zombie mode. You know, zombie mode to me, and a lot of you guys watching this can relate to this. It happens multiple times in your program. Some of you guys are currently in zombie mode right now. You're brain foggy, you're tired, you're lethargic, you're constipated, you're cold. You stopped losing weight, right? So you're in that plateau, you're stuck and you don't know where to go. You don't know what's going on. This is kind of in the same category of issues. I know we're talking here more about muscle mass loss, but this is sort of in the same boat of issues that can go wrong, specifically not eating enough when starting GLP-1 medications. So losing muscle mass is one big issue. Getting into starvation mode and just having a full-blown plateau that will not get better without you actually doing a reset and fixing it. But muscle mass loss can just happen even before you get into the plateau. Understand that when you lose weight, regardless of anything else, you will lose muscle mass. But what you're trying to do, the game you're trying to play, especially when you're trying to improve your health and improve your metabolic health, is to lose the most amount of fat while preserving the most amount of muscle mass tissue. And I've mentioned earlier about things like body fat percentage. These are extremely important metrics to consider. Waist circumference, waist height measurement. BMI is like the worst thing to utilize as a metric for your overall metabolic health. It's definitely more applicable for like larger populations to quickly analyze what's going on to their metabolic health. But yeah, body fat percentage is much better. Getting back to these GLP-1 medications and the concept of muscle mass loss, only if you allow yourself to fall into a massive caloric deficit and or not consuming adequate protein, and this is where I wanted to get to next, is not performing solid hypertrophy style weight training program. This is a must. So resistance training, there's many forms, and to me the best form is hypertrophy, which is the type of training you would do with the goal in mind of maximal muscular fiber density increase, bigger muscle fibers. And we want bigger muscle fibers. We want more lean body mass. Strength is important and we need strength as well, but we need more muscle. Muscle mass itself is a very metabolically active tissue. It burns more calories at rest. So you are in a much better metabolic state having more lean body mass on your body. Also, I love the way Dr. Gabriel Leon talks about it. Muscle mass is the organ of longevity. You will literally live longer the more muscle mass you have on your body. It's the currency of your metabolism. The more muscle, and what do I mean by that? The more muscle mass you have on your body, the more glucose you can tolerate, because these are the two areas in your body that store glucose. It's your liver and your muscle mass. So the more muscles you have on your body, the bigger your muscles, the more glucose you can handle. And the more glucose you can handle, the lower your insulin levels will be, the harder it is to literally become insulin resistant. And so talk about maintaining insulin sensitivity. By definition, the more muscle mass you have on your body, the easier it'll be to stay insulin sensitive, the harder it'll be to become insulin resistant because you got bigger reservoirs for glucose. I love the way Dr. Jason Fung talks about diabetes and insulin resistant pathway as just a situation where you're just stuffed with glucose. You have no more room to put the glucose. And I couldn't agree more. And so giving yourself bigger tanks, bigger reservoirs for glucose by increasing muscle mass, well, you can fill in the dots. Hypertrophy, definitely something that you guys can check out and Google and learn more about. I always recommend, if you've never really been trained at all in weight training or hypertrophy style specifically, getting a personal trainer for 5 to 10 sessions is a phenomenal investment at the local gym. Talk about going to a gym and not knowing what you're doing. I mean, I love the enthusiasm for someone to just be like, I'm gonna go and not be worried about, looking foolish and doing the wrong things. That kudos to you, because you shouldn't care what other people think. But still, it sucks when you don't know what to do, You probably won't get results past that first phase, if you even do, because of the newbie gains we talked about earlier. Nothing feels better in the context of going to a gym when you actually have a plan of attack. You know what machines to go to, you know how many sets to do, you know what repetitions you do, you know how to, what muscular intensity is. If there's one variable I can focus on for the sake of this video out of everything, look, for a hypertrophy style, 8 to 12 reps, you want to do, if you're starting out, 3 workouts a week is plenty, 45 to 60 minutes is fine, 90-second rests in between each set, that's all great, and that's all definitely going to help you with bigger muscles. But the most important variable is just understanding the intensity. As you perform each repetition of, say, a chest press, there needs to be some mind-muscle connection, and there's this concept of complete muscular failure, which is, while maintaining really good form. So for example, the chest press, you're not creating any pain in your shoulder or your elbow. You're taking that set all the way to failure, to where you literally cannot perform a single additional rep. Now, you don't need to actually go that close to failure, going anywhere 1 to 3 reps of that. So in the beginning, going 3 reps away from failure. As you get more and more advanced, 2 reps from failure, and then maybe 1 reps from failure. And then every now and then you can go to failure too. So this is the most important variable. The pain, right? The muscular burn, the lactic acid. That's by the way, that's what's happening. It's a lactic acid buildup in the muscle, because that lactic acid is a byproduct of that glycolytic pathway. You have your aerobic respiration, which is your fat burning. Your fat burning system requires oxygen. There is no byproduct of acid, but you can only provide energy up to a certain threshold. So whenever the activity you're performing exceeds that threshold, usually both systems are turning on at the same time, with the aerobic system starting to decrease as the intensity increases, and your anaerobic system without oxygen is increasing. It's not an on and off with one or the other. They're both working together. But with weightlifting, this is a primarily anaerobic activity. So you have that byproduct of lactic acid. Think about if you jog, you're starting to get some burning in your legs, but it's not so much burning that you can't keep it up. You're producing some lactic acid, but you're buffering that acid out, meaning you're neutralizing it, and you're at an equilibrium so you can continue to do it. But if you started to increase the speed, you'd notice you'd start to burn more, right? If you're sprinting, you're burning more. And for some people, it's the cardiovascular piece of it that creates the I can't do it anymore, or it's the burning. And I'll tell you what, if you want to feel some really powerful leg burning lactic acid but still kind of cardio thing, try some sprints on a bike, on a recumbent bike, where you stand up and you're sprinting. Woo, that's a good way to get the legs burning. So the hypertrophy training, the adequate protein consumption, and the adequate calories are the ways that you will protect your muscle mass in any weight loss program, whether you're on GLP-1 medications or not. If anyone tells you GLP-1 medications create muscle mass loss, you need to stop listening to that person, because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. In the context of what you've just learned now, GLP-1 medications with adequate protein intake, without being in massive caloric restrictions, paired with hypertrophy style training, I'd argue all day that you would actually build more muscle mass. And we see that. I see that in patients all the time, because of the effects on insulin resistance, reducing inflammation, the positive impact of the GLP-1s can have downstream on sex hormone production, like testosterone, for example. So there's nothing but benefit from GLP-1s in terms of muscle mass loss, but you have to understand these these fundamental pieces. Otherwise, you will become those dreaded skinny fat people. And we've seen this outside of GLP-1s, but we're seeing it a lot more. And that's part of what I call zombie mode, is you look like a literal zombie. You're losing your muscle mass. You're losing your hair too, by the way. You feel like crap because you didn't get the basics in that we just covered. So get these things in. Don't be afraid of the GLP-1 medications. And if you want to do this right, if you want to do this the right way, in my opinion, you want to get all these lifestyle interventions in that I've talked about, and you want to utilize the lowest dose possible. I'm going to link our landing page in the description, but get yourself booked for a consultation, guys. Let's help you do this right. I want to make sure that you guys are successful, whether you have the GLP-1 medications, whether you wanting to do the coaching and start everything at the same time, or whether you already have the medications. We got you covered. Check us out, lastingweightlossnow.com, guys. If you enjoyed this video, check this one out right here. It's a more comprehensive dive into the overall approach that we take in terms of helping people achieve lasting weight loss, utilizing these medications and minimizing your risks and complications on these medications. We'll see you guys later.